My name is CGrubel. I am a graduate student at Queens College and CUNY Graduate Center. I do not have any slides today, so just keep talking. I've been working with John Waldman of Queens College, Jim Lodge, and Dennis Siskowski of Hudson River Foundation, and we're working with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We just completed a rapid assessment of damage through Hurricane Sandy to Raritan Bay, Hudson River estuaries, as well as the tributaries, watersheds, etc. It was a fairly broad survey. As a result, it overlaps with a number of things that have been said today and some things that will be. So I'm going to try as best I can to steer clear of any redundancies from what other people have already covered. And a lot of people in this room I've already talked to on the phone, which means hi. So starting out looking at the Raritan Bay, New York Harbor in general, we were very interested as much as possible in looking at effects on specific species, species of fish, birds, what have you. Often it was not possible. It's a little bit early yet. A lot of surveys and real strenuous research has not been done yet. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been conducting a finfish survey within the area, all the way from Newark Bay and New York Harbor, Arthur Kill, etc. And they had some interesting possible results. In the 4 weeks leading up to the storm, their staining samples were dominated by bay anchovy with a little bit of blueback herring. In the couple of weeks following the storm, all of a sudden you have a good number of blueback herring as well as small numbers of alewives, a little bit of American shad, and some Atlantic menhaden. That could possibly indicate that there was an increased rate of fish migrating out of the rivers into the ocean. Such a phenomenon was seen after Irene last year, even more so than this, but it's still a little bit early to say for sure whether that's going on. In terms of life below the surface otherwise, there's a project to replant eelgrass in Gowanus Bay. Bert Chazar, who is here with us today, is one of the researchers working on that. And at this point, it doesn't appear that there was any damage to the eelgrass beds that they were working on, which is a positive sign. Further up towards Bronx River, there was some restoration sites with oysters, some restoration beds. And again, very little damage seen, maybe a little bit of shell displacement, that's about it. So overall, that seems fairly positive. Looking at Jamaica Bay, and that was already discussed a little bit, but I can talk about some of the species implications that we were made aware of. It was mentioned that the West Pond had a good channel cut into it, so it's basically part of the bay right now. For diamondback terrapins, which nest around there, this could be seen as a positive. As it is right now, this has actually increased their foraging and breeding habitats, or possible foraging and breeding habitats. In addition, the storm did flatten some sand dunes, which has also created some more habitat for them, breeding habitat for them. So for diamondback terrapins in general, this might have been somewhat of a nice event, a good event. Looking at horseshoe crabs, there's a number of important horseshoe crab breeding sites within the bay, and no one that I talked with had been out to visit them specifically. However, again, it's with a lot of sand deposition on shores around the area, it may also be beneficial for them in general. It really depends. They're very specific on grain size for nesting locations, so it kind of depends the sediments that are being moved onto the beaches when that's the case, as to whether that's going to be beneficial for them or not. On Breezy Point, a lot of American beach grass was apparently wiped out, though the rhizomes and roots are reported to have survived. They think that they'll come back, but a little bit thinner. That could be good for sandpipers and black skimmers, which nest in the area. Um, and the biggest problem that may be occurring in Jamaica Bay in general is on Breezy Point especially, there was a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done in the human community. That's likely to continue into the spring, summer, maybe beyond. And all that disturbance, of course, could be harmful for any birds that want to nest there. In addition, the Reese Park parking lot right now is being used as a dumping grounds. I've heard the same thing from various areas in Staten Island. The problem with that right now is that it is attracting a good number of cats and dogs. I'm sure raccoons have also discovered this, and maybe other predators as well. A lot of gulls have been reported in the area. And so the increased confluence of predators to that area could, of course, have a major impact on nesting of birds or terrapins or other species in the area. Moving over to Staten Island, of course, it was talked about a little bit. The east shore, east side of Staten Island was hit very, very hard. Tidal waters reportedly went in as far as about 60 feet inland, in one case even 150 feet inland, bringing with it sand. We now have an understory that in some areas is covered in as much as 3 inches of sand. In addition to Phragmites stalks, which were carried even further into about 400 feet inland, also covering the understory. So that could have an impact come spring, depending on how things go. The bluffs at Great Kills, which used to be homes to belted kingfishers, banking cliff swallows, were completely wiped out. So those birds, whether they're going to return or where they're going to have to find new breeding habitat, is yet to be seen. Another concern is ponds along that shore were all generally within the flood zone. There was a fish kill a little bit further inland from there, but there's also a big concern. People might have heard about it in the news. There is a new, yet unnamed leopard frog species that was discovered on Staten Island, but it also occurs in a few other places in our area. And all of its known breeding locations within Staten Island are in the flood zone, and while they do not know its exact salinity tolerances, they are believed to be lower than straight seawater. Furthermore, the frogs were active at that time of year. It was a little bit early for them yet to be hibernating. So researchers involved in the study of that frog are particularly concerned to see how they've done, how they've survived. Moving on to the west side of Staten Island, the oil spill obviously had a huge impact. Prall's Island, which was right off the coast over there, was completely overwashed. There was an area that New York City Parks was planting to encourage wading birds to re-nest, and that was completely not only destroyed through the floodwaters, but afterwards deer got in because the fencing was knocked down and that was destroyed as well. Moving over to the Meadowlands, again, a lot of tidal surge entering freshwater ponds. There were a number of fish kills throughout, including at the Hackensack River. All these kills are believed to be through the sudden increase in salinity. Instead of stranding, there's no marine fish have been mentioned at this time. Kearney Marsh in particular has now been described as being more of a freshwater lake surrounded by Phragmites instead of having floating Phragmites beds within. It had been an important breeding site for least bitterns. At this time, we're not sure how that's going to be affected. And again, as with Staten Island, that leopard frog species, there are at least a few ponds within the Meadowlands that the frog was known to mate in, to breed in, which are of concern from flooding. Around the area, it seems, throughout the area, it seems that Phragmites restoration sites are largely unharmed. The only one that I heard about that seemed to have taken a really heavy hit from the storm itself is in Soundview Park up in the Bronx River. Aside from that, the Bronx River fared completely well and may even benefit from this. tree branches and things like that, down trees knocked into the river are considered beneficial. They'll be helpful for the American eel population as well as other fish, though they will have to take into account recreational uses of the rivers as well. I think that covers all the highlights, and be happy to talk with anyone afterwards.
And Colin, just to point out that those reports are already published online, a preliminary.
The report is, we're actually submitting it today, so it's going to be up fairly soon. I don't know the exact date, but there are other studies being also backed by National Fish and Wildlife Foundation that are being done up and down the East Coast. Each of them has a different submittal date. So I think Long Island and New Jersey is submitting on Friday, and I'm not sure when Chesapeake or other areas are. But yeah, be on the lookout for them.